Shabbat Shalom, everyone. As you're joining us, we'll start in just a few minutes. If you, we'll put the prayers up on the screen, but if you want to follow along, of course, you can do so with the Siddur. You can download that from the temple website at templeshalom.ca/video, just below the video screen. If you have names that you'd like us to include for Misha Berach, you can put those into the chat or the comment window if you're on YouTube or Facebook or on the temple website. And also, if you have names for Kaddish, you can include those as well. Just please indicate for us which is which. So Shabbat Shalom, and thank you for joining us at this earlier time. We've been playing with our service times a little bit as we think about returning to some form of in-person worship. We were able to be together last weekend, and hopefully we'll be able to do that again. We'll be tomorrow for a bar mitzvah. But we think we're going to move our service times to 8 o'clock for the foreseeable future. 8:15 just seemed a little late, and 6 o'clock seemed a bit too early for most of us to try to get Shabbat dinner in before, and then afterwards we were kind of done. So we're going to go with 8 o'clock for now until you tell us otherwise. If you recall, we surveyed the congregation before COVID as to what was the best service time. Do you remember this?
I remember.
Yeah, 6, 7, or 8, or 8:15, or whatever it was, and 50% chose 6, and 50% chose 8:15. And we didn't.
Well, at least we were unanimous about 7.
Right. And unanimous about 7. So let's begin.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הלך עמדה ליבי, חוסנה ואל נתתעלם. 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 הלך עמדה ליבי, חוסנה ואל נתתעלם.
Before we continue with our service, we want to acknowledge the tremendous suffering that is going on in Israel today amongst its inhabitants, Jews and Arabs, and all of those that call that land sacred and call it home. If this war was being fought, if this conflict was being fought on Facebook through postings or position statements made by organizations, then perhaps the only casualties would be screen diminished eyes or paper cuts from turning pages of newspapers. Not that anybody reads newspapers anymore, but though the battle seems to be raging very much on social media, we know that in a very real way, it is raging in very serious and deadly ways on the streets and in the cities of Israel and in the territories and in Gaza. There's no easy way to talk about this without offending some. I learned that as we sent out a statement this week, and I call it the Goldilocks rule. For some, it was not hard enough. For others, it was too soft. For some, it was too hard. For some, it was too soft. For others, it was just right. For the most part, I think people found it to be the right balance of things. But we all come into this with our own feelings of what should be right. We'll talk later tonight with Rabbi Stacy Blank about her experience of what's going on in Israel. We'll share some poems and some songs of those from our tradition that will help give context to something that is all too familiar. But what I want to invite you to do tonight, and what I tried to do in the letter that Rabbi Brown and I sent, and probably subsequent statements that will come and that I've seen from communities as well, is if we can set aside the politics for a moment and just focus on the people. The humanity that is tonight, this morning in Israel, living in fear, not sure where they can find shelter, not sure if they will make it through the day whole, if they will see family. I don't just mean Jewish families, but I mean Palestinian families as well. In general, and really far and away in majority, the people that are most directly affected by this conflict had nothing to do with starting it and have little influence over ending it. These are decisions, to the extent that they are decisions that are being made by politicians, to the extent that they are politicians, that seem to be answerable, I'm not sure to whom. But there are human beings and human lives that are impacted by all of this. And if we can focus on that for Shabbos, if we can set the politics that is going on there aside, and just focus on the humanity, to have empathy for the human experience, perhaps we can begin to recognize that we can't keep doing this. We can't keep trying to kill each other in order to inhabit the land by ourselves with no one else there. Already, I've probably offended some of you just in those what I think are fairly simple and universal value statements. But that's okay. It's okay to be offended. It's okay to be upset. It's not okay to hurt people. It's not okay to kill people because you're offended and because you're upset, no matter how offended or upset you are. I think that that is universally true. And so we continue as we sing a song. It's hard to sing a song with that kind of beginning, but as we sing a song to God, as we sing a new song, as we thank God for this day, this Shabbos day. Shiru Adonai Shir Chadash, Psalm 96.
Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru miyom liyom yeshuato, sapru v'goyim kavodo, v'chol hamim nifleotav, ki gadol Adonai. Hulal meyod norahu al kol Elohim ay 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 yadai dadai dai dai dadai dai 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 dadai dai 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 dadai dai yadai dadai dai dai dadai dai ya dai dai ya dai dai ya dai dadai dai ya dai dai ya dai dai ya dai dadai dai ya dai 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 ya dai 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 ya dai ya dai ya dai ya dai 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 ya dai ya dai dai. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bachem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seidchem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
I was so into our tefillah, I forgot I'm supposed to turn the pages. We'll continue Lecha Dodi as we welcome the Sabbath bride.
Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala B'nei Shabbat Nekabela Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad Hishmiyanu el hamiuchad Adonai echad Ushmo echad l'shemo tiferet Letehila Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala B'nei Shabbat Nekabela Likrat Shabbat Lechu v'nelcha Ki mekor haberacha Merosh mikedem nesucha Sof maaseh b'machshava techila Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala B'nei Shabbat Nekabela Mikdash Melech Ir Melucha Kumitzei mitoch hafecha Rav lach shevet be'amek habacha Uyachamol alayechem la Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala B'nei Shabbat Nekabela Hitoreri Kiva orach kumi ori uri shir daberi kavod Adonai alayich nigla lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela Boi v'shalom teret bala Gam besimcha uvtola Toch emunei am segula Boi chala Lecha Dodi Likrat kala B'nei Shabbat Nekabela.
We'll continue as we rise now for Chatzi Kaddish. Again, if you're following along in our Siddur, it's on page 263, or it's also on the screen in front of you. And there's Rabbi Brian.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba Be'alma divrachute v'yamlich malchute V'chayechon v'yomechon Uv'chayedechol Beit Yisrael Bagala Uv'izman kariv V'yimeru Amen Yeshmei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam Ol Me'omaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh Shemei Kudusha Barichu Le'elam Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Tamiram ve'oma ve'imeru Amen. Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach
Baruch Adonai Amvorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed.
You'd be seated at home, and we'll read together Ma'ariv Aravim. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, Asher Bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim. B'chochma Poteach She'arim, Uvitvuna Mishane Itim, Umachalif Et Hazmanim, Umesader Et HaKochavim B'mishmeroteim Barakia Kirtzono. Borei Yom V'Layla, Golel Or Mipnei Choshech, V'choshech Mipnei Or. Umavir Yom Umevi Laila, Umavdil Ben Yom Uvein Laila, Adonai Tzvaot Shemo. El Chai V'Kayam Tamid Imloch Aleinu Leolam Va'ed, Baruch Ata Adonai HaMa'ariv Aravim.
Amen. Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amchavta Torah Mitzvot Chukim Umishpatim Otanu Limadata Al Kein Adonai Eloheinu V'Shofbeinu Uvkumeinu Nasiach B'chokecha V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha u'b'mitzvotecha le'olam le'olam va'ed ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu u'vahem negei yomam v'layla ve'ahavatecha al tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch Atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael Ohev Amo Yisrael Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha V'chol avavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha Ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele Asher anochi mitzavecha Hayom alevavecha V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam V'shivtecha b'veitecha v'lechtecha v'derech Uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha Ukshartam lehot al yadecha Ve'hayu letotafot beinenecha Uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha Uvisharecha Leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai V'tem kadoshim le'Elohechem Ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim Lihiot lachem le'Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem Emet.
Emet. We read together. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot. That wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt. That there is a better place, a promised land. That the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness. That there is no way to get from here to there, except by joining hands, marching together.
Mi chamocha be'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot osefele, nora tehilot osefele. Machotecha ra'u banecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam ze'eliyanu ve'amru Adonai yimloch Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. V'ne'emar kifad Adonai et Yaakov, ugalo biyad chazak mimenu. Baruch atah Adonai, Ka'al Yisrael.
So we think about our prayers, and as Rabbi Dan mentioned at the beginning of our service, just being with our concern and our prayer for peace. We ask that God should protect all of Israel with a shelter of peace. We've seen the really amazing technology of the Iron Dome, the missile shield that has protected so many in Israel over this past week. It's not perfect, but it has surely saved many, many lives. And we ask that shelter should be extended, not just with technology and military, but through God's presence, that we might all find peace. We'll join together. Hashkivenu.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen.
Continue with Vishamru.
Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, ביני ובין בני ישראל, ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. Yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash. Yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, 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 Shalom.
I invite you now to rise at home as we continue with the Amidah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon. Gomel chasadim tovim v'konei hakol, v'zocher chasdei avod v'imahot, u'mevi geula livnei v'neihem, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר מושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל. מחלקל חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ברופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני הפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדום מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה. ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום ילדוך סלה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Amen. You are holy, your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. You may be seated. We'll continue now with Kadshenu here on 277.
Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, ritzei menuchatenu, kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'tein chelkeinu b'toratecha, sabeinu mitovecha, v'samcheinu b'shuatecha, v'taher libenu, v'taher libenu, v'taher libenu le'avdecha be'emet, v'taher libenu, v'taher libenu, v'taher libenu le'avdecha be'emet. V'hanchilenu Adonai Eloheinu, be'ahava v'ratzon Shabbat kodeshecha, ve'anuchu v'Yisrael, mekadesh shmecha. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat.
May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day, and may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen.
Amen.
Ratzei Adonai Eloheinu be'amcha Yisrael, u'tefilatam be'ahava tekabel, u'tehi ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael. Yisrael Amecha, El Karov Lechol Korav Penei, El Avadecha Vechoneinu, Shefoch Ruchacha, Aleinu, v'techazena heineinu, v'shuvcha leTzion, berachamim. Baruch atah Adonai Hamachazir Shechinato LeTzion LeZion.
Amen.
Amen.
Just a couple of days, starting on Sunday night, we will begin the holiday of Shavuot. And one of the names of Shavuot in our tradition is Chag HaBikurim, the festival of the first fruits, that our ancestors would bring the first fruits, the first produce of the year to Jerusalem for the pilgrimage festival. And I think there's really something quite remarkable about bringing the first thing that grows. It's really an acknowledgement of gratitude to God, to the source of what made possible those first fruits. It's very easy for us to see the first thing and say, wow, look what I did, or wow, I can't wait to bite into that first tomato or strawberry or whatever it is. But to be able to just hold back in a way and to offer that as a gift, as it was in our tradition, is a way of really acknowledging our gratitude. And we don't make a pilgrimage as we once did, but still we have those moments of gratitude that are part of our tradition, including this next prayer in our tefillah of hoda'ah, of thanksgiving. So I invite you to just take a moment to think about what you bring forth as your offering of gratitude. What are those things that you could have easily just taken a bite without thinking and stopping, but really to just first to offer those words of thanks, to really turn that gratitude into an extra blessing. We'll sing together Ve'al Kulam.
Ve'al kulam, ve'al kulam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Shimcha Malkeinu, Tamid le'olam va'ed. Ve'al kulam, ve'al kulam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Yitbarach v'yitromam, Shimcha Malkeinu, Tamid le'olam va'ed. V'cholchem yoducha salah, v'hallelu et shimcha be'emet, Ha'el Yeshua-teinu v'ezratenu salah, Baruch atah Adonai, Hatov Shimcha, Hatov Shimcha, Ulecha, Ulecha Noeh Lehodot.
Amen. I want to share this poem this evening before our prayer of peace. It's a poem by Yehuda Amichai, who was one of Israel's really most well-known and beautiful poets of the 20th century. This poem, I think, speaks very powerfully to our world and to Israel today. It's called The Place Where We Are Right. From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world, like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood.
That's the whole part I got. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I think it keeps going, but that's what we've got. A place where we are right. Continue with our song of peace, Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atah Malach Adon Lecho HaShalom. Ki atah Malach Adon Lecho HaShalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rabba Yisrael Hamcha, tasim leolam. B'tov b'necha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol leid v'chosha b'shlomecha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha tasim leolam. Baruch atah Adonai Mavarech Amo Yisrael Shalom.
Amen. Let's take a moment for our own silent prayer.
Al hadvash ve'al ha'oketz, al hamar v'hamatok, al beiteinu ha'tinoket, shmor eli ha'tov, al ha'esh ha'mevoeret, al ha'mayim hazakim, al ha'ish hashav ha'baita, min hamerchakim. Al kol eile, al kol eile, shmor na li eli hatov, al hadvash ve'al ha'oketz, al hamar ve'hamatok. Al natakor natua, al tishkach et hatikva, ashivenu ve'ashuva el haaretz hatova.
Beautiful to hear those words and that melody of Al Kol Eila. I also want to acknowledge Rabbi Dan had the poem exactly right. Apologies to Yehuda Amichai. It was longer in my head, but that was just how it went. So, friends, we're going to take a moment now to offer a Mishaberach, a prayer of healing for those in our lives, our temple community, and beyond who are in need of healing, many of whom are struggling and some in hospital. We bring our prayers and our hearts pour out to all of them. I want to share the names of some who we are thinking of, especially the Shabbat: Victor Pablo Beltran Ruiz, Johan Tienison, Reina Tienison, Jeanette Tienison, and Frick Tienison. Cornelia Oberlander, Ari Goldman, Justice Guno, Judy Steiner Lossberg, Paula and Bernd Simpson, Eva Leighton, Karen Bernstein, Chaya Sachav Bat Yehuda Valea, Alana James, Yana Timko, Dr. Dimitri Zanazin, Lynn Shabo, Shayna Stawicki, Elliot Pohl, Sanford Cohen, Jean Angus, Sarah Chiachi, Kim Bennett, Sarah Bat Avraham Basara, Igor Ilyasov, Ed Ozer, David Shlomo Gorny, Ronnie Goldberg, Andrea Jarzbiak, and Neil Tapley. There are other people you are thinking of in need of healing. I invite you to share their names out loud in your home or in your heart as we join together in this Mishaberach.
Mishaberach Avoteinu Mekor habracha leimo Bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi shebeirach imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Thank you, Cantor Tausig, and thank you, Rabbi Brown. Thank you for bringing a little bit of Israel to our services tonight, as we continue to pray for all those who are there, and we continue to pray for peace. Wanted to share some announcements with you this evening before our visiting Rabbi Stacy Blank will join us to share a drosh from Jerusalem, or from just outside of Jerusalem, and our sister congregation there, Shir Hadash. Tomorrow morning, we have services at 10 a.m. I'll speak about that in just a moment. Following that service, there actually is not a virtual Kiddush tomorrow, but the bar mitzvah that takes place, there will be, I guess, a virtual reception for the bar mitzvah. The parents are going to give speeches. There's a slideshow, so tune in if you'd like to see that, as Julian Rivlis is called to Torah tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. from our Temple Shalom garden. Tomorrow night at 7:30 is our Havdalah. Please join us on Zoom for that. Monday morning and Wednesday morning minyan at 7:45, not Monday morning because it is Shavuot. So just Wednesday morning at 7:45. Monday morning Shavuot services are at 10 a.m. And so again, a mazel tov to Julian Rivlis, who's going to be called to Torah tomorrow morning. There he is in all of his glory. Mazel tov to his parents. For Julian's mitzvah project, Julian, his brother, and his dad helped pack all of those Passover kits, the 100 or so that we delivered to congregant homes just before Pesach. So we thank them for doing that, and we again thank El Schechter, our program director, who put all of those that whole program and project together. Speaking of mitzvah projects, Joseph Golby is being called to Torah for his bar mitzvah in a few weeks, and he is passionate about saving animals and the environment. And so he is working on a project to something called Ocean Hero. It's a free extension that you can add to Chrome and other web browsers, and every time you open up a tab, you can save plastic bottles from the ocean. I spoke with Joseph earlier this week, and he's saved over 100 bottles already by people clicking that tab. So that is in your Temple email if you want to add that to your browser. We didn't have mitzvah projects like this when I was a bar mitzvah. I think we had them last year either, but COVID times call for different measures. You can click to save a turtle. Torah study Saturdays at 8:30, Talmud Tuesdays at 11. As we've been mentioning, with all that's going on in Israel, please join us for a ceremony of solidarity and support and prayer, a national gathering of solidarity as Jews, students, and Holocaust survivors from across Canada lead us in prayer for our brothers and sisters in Israel under attack. That's Sunday, May 16th at 12 noon. That is promoted on our, I think it was in the Federation email that came out today. On Sunday night, May 16th, we have two Shavuot, not one, but two Shavuot opportunities. I'm doing them now, I guess, in reverse order. Our Vancouver community Shavuot service and Tikkun Leil Shavuot and study for the evening of Shavuot begins at 7:30 via Zoom. Will be part of that will be study with Rabbi Brown and the other rabbis of the other congregations, and worship with myself and the other rabbis of the congregations at 8:30. Join us. The topic is Torah revealed in our life and times. Vancouver area rabbis talk about walking diverse paths of Torah. And if you haven't had enough Shavuot, at 3:45 Pacific, you can join us for the Reformed Tikkun Leil Shavuot. This is the second cross-Canada Reformed Jewish Communities of Canada Shavuot. Rabbi Brown's going to be teaching in that session also. with some of our colleagues from across the country, Finding God in the Cloud, Hidden Revelations in Your Netflix Queue. So that begins at 3:45 via Zoom. A link was sent out in our emails. I think that is it for the announcements. Let me do this here for a second and get things squared away. And so when everything started to unfold this past week, my first phone calls were to my friends in Israel, friends and colleagues, loved ones who are experiencing this in real time, not through Facebook, not through social media posts, not through the news in its generalizations, in its glorifications, in its moral equivalencies, and all of those things, but in the real reality of what is happening day to day in their lives as they go about in Israel, just now emerging from COVID and getting back into life and school and events, and then to have sirens wailing and rockets raining down. And one of the first people that I called out to was Rabbi Stacy Blank. We know Rabbi Blank. Her congregation, Shir Hadass, is in a suburb of Jerusalem, Sur Hadassah. Just really, if you were to look at a map, it's just on the Green Line. And I asked Rabbi Blank to share with us what is going on for her and her community right now. And of course, with the time change, we had to record her remarks earlier today. But it's my pleasure to be able to share them with you now. So hopefully this will work.
Shabbat Shalom to all of our friends at Temple Shalom, from all of us here in Kilat Shir Chadash in Sur Hadassah. Thank you for the invitation to share with all of you some of my thoughts about some of the events of the past days here. And really thank you to everyone who has reached out to see if we're okay. And we in Sur Hadassah area are fine. We have not been in the line of fire except for that one time on Monday. But we, the Israelis and the Palestinians in this tiny land, in my opinion, are not okay. Monday was Jerusalem Day, and I've enjoyed pluralistic activities over the past week, neighborhood tours and celebrations of Jerusalem culture. We pluralistic Jerusalemites, however, start to get stomach pains as the actual day arrives and we see hordes of teenagers who generally identify as national religious fill the streets. I was happy to hear about the successful efforts to prevent the nationalistic march from passing through Damascus Gate, which is the main gate for Palestinians, to the Muslim quarter. Throughout the week, I heard about confrontations between Israeli police and Muslims on the Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock, as this coincided with the final days of Ramadan. I heard about the protests in Sheikh Jarrah about ejecting Palestinians from their homes for Jewish settlers. And I admit, even though I've done a lot of reading the past few days about these situations, I don't yet quite understand how this erupted into such violent conflict in those places and surrounding those issues. I chose on Jerusalem Day to preserve the daily routine of my kids, so I did not participate in the distribution of flowers by Jews to Palestinians in the Old City and East Jerusalem, led by Tag Meir, which is a group which promotes good relations between Jews and Palestinians. Every time there is an act of vandalism or violence done by Jews to Arabs and Palestinians, they organize a group of Jews to spread light and messages of friendship. So instead, I sent a donation to support the efforts. I picked up my kids from school, and then I returned with my 7-year-old to our first school event since Corona, which coincided with parent-teacher conferences. The kids played games, and the parents chatted. It was a joyous reunion. Then I took my son to our community center for his judo lesson. And while he was inside, I started a Zoom call with a family from the U.S. who hope to hold a bar mitzvah in Jerusalem next year. People were organizing a blood drive in the yard. And then the sirens started. We all looked up at each other, we hesitated, and then our instincts kicked in. I disconnected the conversation. I walked quickly inside the building. Someone shouted to everyone to go down the stairs to check if the bomb shelter is open. I waited for my son to come out of the judo room. I took his hand. I pushed through the people who were just standing there and went down the stairs. And I called to the people to follow us downstairs. The bomb shelter was open, and we all went inside. The kids were asking, "Is this real?" They were too young to remember the summer of 2014. I felt my own personal post-trauma kicking in. I couldn't make phone calls because we were in the bomb shelter, but my text went through, and I texted my husband to get in touch with my other kids. My daughter, who's 11, was still at basketball. She plays in the Arab-Jewish Peace Players team at the YMCA. My son, who's 13, was biking home and was in the middle of the street with no building access. But my husband spoke to him and told him what he needed to do if the situation happened again. And we acknowledged with him just how scary that was for him to be there alone. After the 10 minutes passed, my son returned to judo because that's what we do. We go on. Afterwards, we spoke about it. Why were people sending rockets? Well, there have been wars in the past, and one side lost. And some people want to make peace and work to live together. And some people want to continue the war. And this is what they do. Our country knows how to protect itself, I told him, and to protect us. And we all do our part to help each other to be safe. Then the rockets started to hit Israel near the Gaza Strip. Yesterday, or really now 2 days ago, in the afternoon, I was informed of an incident in my children's school, my daughter's class, of pupils who sang racist songs against the Arabs, drew Palestinian flags, and ripped them up. My daughter and other children told them that they opposed these racist acts and to stop. The pupils called them names that I will not share with you right now. My daughter informed the teacher who spoke with them. My son's swimming lessons, the little one, resumed after 10 months because there was a break because of the coronavirus. And his teacher, Muhammad, and he greeted us as if we'd only met last week, and he just continued teaching them as if they were just picking up from before, business as usual. And he's a very good swimming teacher, by the way. Then that night, Tel Aviv and the entire center of Israel was bombarded. All my social networks were filled with pictures and messages. Older people were calm. Younger people expressed fear and anxiety, almost desperation. The news of Israeli bombardment of Gaza was equally distressing. How much more destruction? How many more lives lost? How much more disruption and trauma? And even today I was talking with friends and family that did not sleep the past 2 nights because there were bombings at 1 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, at 5 o'clock. And not everybody has a bomb shelter they can sleep in. And I hear the leaders on both sides who say, "We're stronger. You will feel our heavy hand. We will show them." That same night, it was my weekly bike ride with a group of women that we called it Riding for Our Sanity, which we started during the coronavirus lockdowns. And I asked our group if we could make our route go by downtown Jerusalem to join a protest against the escalation in violence. There was a small but spirited group of about 200 people making its way down Jaffa Street to Zion Square with drums and signs and shouting, "Enough occupation," and Jews and Arabs want to live in coexistence. Someone gave me a sign that I put on my bicycle basket, and a minute later I felt someone reach in my basket, and I turned around and saw a young man tearing up the sign. There were only a few people standing on the outskirts, opposing the protesters, shouting epithets and threats. There was a firm, protective police presence. There was not an Arab in sight, not on the street, and not in the tram that passed by. And in fact, the streets were generally pretty empty. Afterwards, we went to a pub a few streets away, and it was quiet. People were drinking and eating as if we were nowhere near any kind of protest. I got messages from people in Tel Aviv about the hundreds of rockets. So I wrote in one of the groups, multiple realities so close to one another. And one person answered and said, foreigners just wouldn't understand. At home, my husband was anxious. It's much worse, he lamented. The Arabs are rioting in Lod. We are being told it is dangerous for Jews to enter Arab towns in the north. There's no hope for coexistence. And we saw even worse pictures from yesterday of Jews lynching an Arab in Bat Yam, and more violence between Arabs and Jews in Lod, and rocks being thrown off of bridges, and all kinds of violence inside cities. It's terrible and it's scary. I agreed with him. But I said, these could be small groups. These could be young people. I'm sure it's not all the Arabs. So then the next morning I got up early. I went to go play tennis, get out my energy, my nervous energy. And my husband said that the father and daughter who were killed by a Hamas rocket were Arabs from Lod, from the outskirts of Lod. On the way, I listened to the radio. An Arab police officer from Lod was being interviewed. He explained that the riots were groups of young people, young men. He told that they were trying to calm things down and that the police can't be everywhere. He said that all the sides need to take part in calming things down. He called on the elders of the community to go out and help to stop the violence, to be personal examples. The interviewer challenged him and said, it's not enough. What do you mean both sides? And then came on the radio the principal of the Ort High School in Lod, at which Nadine Awad, the girl who was killed by the rocket, was a student in the 10th grade. The principal spoke in perfect Hebrew, and she spoke of Nadine, apologizing that it sounded like a cliche, as an outstanding student who participated in science competitions and cooperations between Arabs and Jews, whose sister is a teacher in the school. She described her as a young woman proud of her Islam and seeking to help people connect with its exalted principles. She said tonight is the holiday Eve, Eid al-Fitr, the end of Ramadan, but there's no holiday for us. And she called upon everybody to take responsibility, lakachat achayut. She said, we have no other land. We have no other city. We have to make sure that there is a future for our children. And then my tears began to flow. Then the sobs came. I barely was able to drive. For a week, I am seeing and reading about escalating tensions in Jerusalem and throughout Israel and the Palestinian territories, and that moment was the first that I heard someone speak about collective responsibility. We are all responsible. I said the same after the disaster at Mount Meron on Lag BaOmer. We must not point fingers, everybody one at the other. We must all take responsibility. Each of us has a part in this. And some of my best friends are men, and I'm married to one. But I must say, men, we are all sick of your war games. And I'm actually very proud that my husband was the first one to say, there's a protest today. There were protests throughout Israel today, and the past day, to go out and say Jews and Arabs refuse to be enemies. And we went out and we stood at the street corner with hundreds of other people, and we saw pictures of other gatherings across Israel in large cities and small on highways, with people holding signs saying, we want to get along. But for those who are warmongering, I'm reminded of Samson, the judge from the book of Judges, we're studying now in our Bible group. Samson and the Philistines got thousands of people killed because they traded back and forth, and I quote, like he did to me, I do to him, like they did to me, I do to them. Why don't we start listening to the women, like the principal at Nadine's school? Because we are all responsible. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you for your love and your prayers. And I know that we will continue to be partners, and responsible partners, in bringing the peace and in bringing prosperity to all the residents of this wonderful land of Israel, this wonderful state of Israel. Od lo avda tikvatenu. We don't lose hope. Shabbat Shalom.
So Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Rabbi Blank, who can't hear me because she's a recording, but I thanked her earlier. I'm just so glad that we have the opportunity to hear on the ground, to hear that in Israel, Jews and Arabs are coming together in protest. They don't want this. We so often get our backs up in defense of what we think is the position that we must take. But as we have heard so often, we should let the land of Israel be our guide. We should let the people of Israel who are living this reality be our guide. And if you only watch the news or you only watch your social media feed, depending on your social media feed, you might not see Tag Mahir and the efforts in pluralism, the efforts in coexistence, the efforts in trying to bring these two communities that live on this land and will live on this land forever. They're not going to give it up either. Trying to find a way to coexist without killing each other. So maybe we can take our lead from them, I hope. We will continue, of course, the conversation. You will continue to send me emails, I am sure, and to Rabbi Brown about your thoughts on the conversation, and that's okay. Let's dialogue, let's talk, but not fight. Too much fighting. It's been a hard enough year and a half. Our service is going to continue now with Elenu, and I just need to get the slides back up on screen. Which I can do by doing this. Nice background, isn't it?
Very cool.
Oh, actually, we got to count the Omer.
Count the Omer.
Rabbi Brown, do you have it?
I've got it.
Mine on my desk at the temple.
Yep. Hineni muchan u'mezuman l'kayam mitzvah aseh shel sfirat ha'omer. I'm ready to fulfill the mitzvah of counting of the Omer. This is going to be our last Shabbat, counting the Omer. It's very exciting. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer. Praise to you, Adonai, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to count the Omer. Hayom Shmona v'arba'im yom, shehem shisha shavuot v'shisha yamim ba'omer. Today is 48 days, which are 6 weeks and 6 days of the Omer. So now we'll continue with Elenu, and invite you at home if you'd like to please rise.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, hatet gedula leotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye ha'aratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chalkenu kaham, v'gor aleinu k'cho hamonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim Hakadosh Baruch Hu Shehu Notei Shamayim Ve'oser Haaretz U'Moshe V'Karo B'Shamayim Imaho U'Shchinatu Zo B'Govei Meromim U'Eloheinu Ein Od Emet Malkeinu Efes Ulato Kakatu betarato be'adata hayom v'ashevota elevavecha ki Adonai hu Elohim b'shamayim imaho ve'aretz mitachat einod v'nemar V'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad echad.
The light of life is a finite flame. Like the Shabbat candles, life is kindled, it burns, it glows, it is radiant with warmth and beauty. But soon it fades and its substance is consumed, and it is no more. In light we see, in light we are seen. The flames dance, and our lives are full. But as night follows day, the candle of our life burns down and gutters. There is an end to the flames. We see no more, and we are no more seen. Yet we do not despair, for we are more than a memory, slowly fading into the darkness. With our lives, we give life. Something of us can never die. We move in the eternal cycle of darkness and death, of light and life. The Kaddish prayer reminds us that we are not alone at this time of mourning, that we can find comfort in our faith, comfort in each other, the community that surrounds us. And so on this Shabbat, we recall those who died during this past week, these past 30 days, whose families are in the midst of Shiva and Shloshim. Thomas R. Berger, Bella Brenman, Shraga Gestetner, Daniel Navarro, Ricky Siegel, Gary Joseph Simkin, Dovi Steinmetz, and those for whom the Yortzeit, the anniversary of the death of their loved ones, falls on this Shabbat. As I read the name of your loved one, if you could please rise in your homes so that we can comfort you even in this virtual environment. Ian Angus, Gisela Ballant, Irving Brown, Jack Chernin, Max Chisik, Abraham Chodas, Dorothy Kronk, Wendy Marguerite Dion, Marvin Langman Elson, Dimitri Fixer, Linda Freeman Katz, Harold Freeman, Martha Friedlander, Harry Gettiger, Muriel Goldberg, Sarah Lee Gordon, Yehoshua Hendel, Harold Henry, Gregory Kahn, Dr. Morris Corman, Dr. Albert Leposki, Herbert Lewis, Murray Mendelson, Morton Michelson, Trevor Norman, Zara Norman Miller, Bertha Polsky, Jan Prinsmetal, Erwin Rivelis, Joan Rivelis Becker, Arthur Rose, Rita Rosen, Larry Rosen, David Rubenstein, Elmer Sally, Fred Sango, Barbara Savin, Leah Schneider, Shirley Scholz, Mel Shipman, Esther Schulman, Bud Temple, Bluma Tischler, Jim Tisdale, Benny Warhaft, Alan Wilder, Joe Williams, David Zivot. We add to those names the names of all of those who've died in defense of freedom and justice, victims of terror in this land, in the land of Israel, around the world. Those who've died from this pandemic and those who died in the Shoah and the Holocaust, but have no family left to remember them, we recall them for blessing as well as we join together in Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. It's on the screen before you. Yitgadal v'yikadash Shemei Rabbah, b'yalma divrach Yerutev yamlich malchuteh, b'chayachon of yomechon u'chayei l'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'maru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh. Vit Adar, Vit Ale, Vit Alal, Shemed Kudisha Briku. Le'elamin kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiron v'alma, v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yakol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yakol Yisrael, v'kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort the bereaved among us. And we say together, Amen. A reminder, if you would, to join us tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Julian Rivelis' bar mitzvah, as he's called to Torah. And join us on Sunday evening for Tikkun Leil Shavuot. You have those two service opportunities online. And then Monday morning at 10 a.m. for our Shavuot and Yizkor service that will be all here on Zoom or on Telus. And we thank you for joining us tonight. There's as far as I can tell, we had about 75 or so people just on the social media. Usually it's about double that on Telus. So it's we all needed to be in shul tonight, and I'm glad that we could be without having to leave our homes. So. Cantor Taussig?
A song of peace.
Okay.
Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen. Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen. May it be so.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. Shalu shalom al Yisrael v'Yerushalayim. May there be peace upon Israel and upon Jerusalem.
Amen.
Amen.